Kael. The morning sky was gray and cold. A long row of men stood on a wooden platform in the middle of the market square. Their wrists were tied. Their heads were low. Around them, a large crowd of people walked slowly, looking at them the way a farmer looks at cattle before buying. Kael stood at the end of the row. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a lean, strong body. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and there were old scars on his arms and hands, the kind that come from surviving things most people do not. Around his neck was a heavy iron collar, dull and rusted at the edges. It sat against his skin like a weight that was meant to remind him, every single second, that he belonged to no one and to nothing. He did not look at the crowd. He looked straight ahead, at the far wall of the square, where old stone bricks were covered in green moss. His gray eyes were still and calm, like a river before a storm. Anyone who looked at him closely would notice something strange, something that did not belong on a slave. He looked like a man who was simply waiting, not suffering, not afraid, just waiting. The auctioneer called out numbers. People raised paddles. Coins were agreed. One by one, the men on the platform were taken away. Then it was Kael's turn. Lot 47, the auctioneer announced, his voice loud and flat. Male, no registered pack, no confirmed wolf, no rank, strong back, good health. Starting bid, low. There was laughter from somewhere in the crowd. Someone made a joke about buying a man with nothing. More laughter followed. Kael did not move. He did not flinch. He breathed slowly and kept his eyes on the wall. In the third row of the crowd, a young woman sat beside her father. Her name was Seraph Voss. She was 22 years old, with dark brown hair tied back simply and careful, quiet eyes that noticed everything around her. Her father, Rodas Voss, was a merchant, a wide, practical man who bought and sold many things, not always kindly, but always efficiently. Rodas raised his paddle twice and won the bid. Seraph watched Kael step down from the platform. A guard pushed him forward. He did not stumble. He walked steadily, his chin up, his hands bound in front of him. As he passed the row where she sat, his eyes moved, just briefly, and met hers. She looked away first, but something stayed with her after he passed. Something she could not name. The Voss estate was large and busy. There were other workers, other servants, a garden that needed constant attention, horses that needed care, heavy loads that needed moving. Kael was given a small room near the stable, 4 walls, a wooden bed, a single window. He was told his duties, and he performed them without complaint, without argument, and without speaking more than necessary. The other servants tested him, as newcomers are always tested. Someone took his water, someone gave him extra work, someone made a sharp comment about the collar around his neck. Kael absorbed each thing with complete silence. Not the silence of someone who was afraid to speak, but the silence of someone who had decided that none of these things were worth his voice. It bothered people more than anger would have. Seraph began to notice things about him almost by accident. The estate dogs, 3 large animals that growled at every other servant and had to be handled carefully, would walk to Kael and sit at his feet without being called, their tails low and calm. The horses he tended became noticeably easier to manage. Even the older workers, men who had been on the estate for years and who spoke to newcomers with little patience, became quieter when Kael was nearby. Not rude, just quiet, as though they were thinking without quite knowing why. One evening, Seraph brought a plate of food to the stables. She told herself it was because the kitchen had made extra. She was not sure she believed herself. Kael looked at the plate, then at her. "Thank you," he said simply. 2 words, but the way he said them, not grateful in a desperate way, not humble in a defeated way, made her feel, for a strange second, as though she were the one receiving something. She left quickly and thought about it for the rest of the night. Weeks passed. One afternoon, Seraph needed to visit the pack market to collect a shipment for her father. She brought Kael along to carry the goods. The market was crowded and noisy, full of merchants and buyers and children and noise. They moved through it efficiently, until 3 young ranked wolves blocked their path near the eastern stalls. They were the kind of young men who wore their rank like a costume, loudly, carelessly, always looking for an opportunity to remind someone of it. They spoke to Seraph in a way that was designed to make her feel small. One of them stepped close, another laughed. The third said something that made the first two laugh harder. Kael stepped forward. He said nothing. He simply moved between Seraph and the three men and stood there. What happened next was something Seraph thought about for a long time afterward. The three men went quiet. Their expressions changed. It was not fear exactly. It was more like the feeling a person gets when they are about to say something foolish in front of someone important, and they suddenly realize it. One of them opened his mouth, closed it. The other two exchanged a glance. Then, without a word, all three of them stepped aside and walked away. Seraph stared at the back of Kael's head. "How did you do that?" she asked. He turned to face her. "I do not know what you mean," he said. She almost argued. But she noticed something else instead. The sleeve of his shirt had shifted, and on the inside of his left forearm, she could see a mark. A birthmark, dark and distinct, shaped in a way that reminded her immediately of something she had seen before. Something old. She could not place it in the moment, but the shape stayed in her mind as they walked home. That evening, she went to the basement of the estate where her father kept old storage, rolled maps, sealed records, folded banners from trading partnerships long finished. She moved through the shelves until she found what she was looking for. An old Drayson trade banner, rolled and tied with cord that had gone stiff with age. She untied it and spread it on the floor. The crest of the Drayson bloodline looked up at her from the fabric. It was the same shape as the mark on Kael's arm. She sat with that knowledge for a long time. Then she folded the banner carefully, tied it back, and went to bed. She did not sleep. Meanwhile, far from the Voss estate, in the great Drayson pack seat, a man named Darian sat in a chair that did not quite fit him, not in size, but in something less visible. He was handsome, well-dressed, and perfectly composed in the way that people are when they have worked very hard to look like they belong somewhere. He was Kael's half-brother. He was the one who had arranged everything, the forged documents, the bribed council members, the story about Kael being illegitimate and wolfless. He was the one who had sold his own brother to a slave trader. He had believed the problem was solved, but reports were reaching him. Small ones, a slave with storm-gray eyes, who made ranked wolves go quiet without saying a word. A man on a merchant's estate who handled horses that no one else could handle, and wore a collar that a visiting physician had apparently gone pale upon seeing. Darian called his head enforcer. "Find him," he said, "confirm it, and then make it finished." The enforcer and 4 others arrived at the Voss estate 3 days later, under the pretense of checking slave registration papers. Seraph was in the library when she heard the horses in the courtyard. Something tightened in her chest without explanation. From the library window, she watched the enforcers move through the courtyard. She watched them reach Kael, who was carrying firewood near the side wall. She watched the lead enforcer grab his arm, and she saw the man's face change completely when he saw the mark. He stepped back. He disguised it quickly, covered it with a harsh word and a shove, and then moved the group along. But Seraph had seen. She had seen the enforcer's hand tremble. That night she could not stop moving through the house, room to room, thinking. She went to the kitchen, then back to the library. Then she stopped at the window and stood very still. A courier arrived just before midnight. He asked for Seraph Voss by name, handed her a sealed letter, and left without another word. The seal was plain. No family mark, no crest. Just wax. She broke it open and read. The letter was from Elder Marin, an ancient pack elder who had served the Drayson bloodline for 50 years. It was written in a shaking hand, but the words were clear and precise. It described the blood test performed at Kael's birth, the one that confirmed he was the true heir to the Drayson Alpha King seat, the highest rank in the entire pack world. It described how Darian had paid 3 council members to bury the results and replace them with forged documents declaring Kael illegitimate. It named names. It included dates. It enclosed a copy of the original blood test result, stamped with the ancient Drayson lineage seal. At the bottom, in slightly steadier handwriting, Elder Marin had added one line, "Give this to the man with storm eyes. He will know what it means." Seraph put the letter down on the table. She picked it up again. She read it a second time to be sure she had understood. Then she took the lantern from the table and walked to the stables. Kael was sitting in the dark near the back wall, awake. He looked up when she came in. She crossed the stable without saying anything and placed the letter in his hands. Then she stepped back and held up the lantern so he could read. He read it slowly. His face did not break. It did not twist with pain or light up with sudden joy. It went very, very still, the way a person goes still when something they have always known inside themselves finally arrives in the form of proof. When he finished, he folded the letter along its original lines with careful, controlled hands. He held it for a moment. Then he looked up at her. "I knew they had taken something from me," he said quietly. "I never understood how much." She did not know what to say, so she said the only honest thing she had. "What do you want to do?" He looked at her for a long moment, and then, slowly, a small and certain smile crossed his face. It was the first time she had seen him smile. It was not a joyful smile exactly. It was something older and quieter and more powerful than joy. "What I was always going to do," he said. "Take it back." He did not get the chance to plan. Before the next morning arrived, Darian's enforcers returned to the Voss estate. Not 5 men this time, but 15, and not with paperwork. They broke through the front gate just before dawn. Servants scattered. Rodas Voss stepped into the courtyard in his nightclothes and tried to speak with them, and one of the enforcers pushed him aside hard enough that he fell against the wall and did not get up quickly. Seraph ran toward her father. Kael walked into the courtyard. The lead enforcer moved toward him with a length of chain. He reached for the iron collar around Kael's neck, and Kael caught his wrist. The moment their hands made contact, something happened that no one in the courtyard would ever fully be able to describe afterward. There was a sound, not loud, but deep. The kind of sound that you feel in your chest before you hear it with your ears. The iron collar cracked, then cracked again. Then it fell away from Kael's neck in 3 pieces and hit the stone floor. Silence. The collar had been a binding collar, ancient wolfcraft, designed specifically to suppress the wolf of a high-ranking bloodline. It had been placed on Kael the night his world was taken from him. For years, it had held what was inside him pressed down, locked away, as though it did not exist. It existed. The air in the courtyard changed. It was not visible, but every person there felt it. A pressure, low and wide, like the feeling in the air before lightning strikes. The horses in the stable shifted and went quiet. The estate dogs lay down flat and did not move. The 15 enforcers stood perfectly still, and then, one by one, their legs bent. Not because they decided to kneel. Their bodies simply moved, their wolves recognizing, in the way that wolves always recognize what is above them, that the creature standing in front of them was not equal to them, was not even in the same conversation as them. The lead enforcer was the last one still standing. He was a large man and proud, and he fought his own instincts visibly, his jaw tight, his hands shaking. He lasted about 4 seconds, then he dropped to one knee like the rest. Kael looked at him. "Tell him I am coming," Kael said, in a voice so calm it was somehow louder than any shout. 3 days later, Kael stood before the full Drayson Pack Council, every ranked wolf, every elder, every official of weight in the pack world, inside the great stone hall of the Drayson seat. He was clean, straight-backed, unhurried. At his right side, close, but not behind him, stood Seraph. Darian was already there. He sat at the head of the council table in a fine coat, his expression perfectly arranged into something between amusement and disdain. But his fingers, beneath the table where most could not see, pressed hard against his palm. Elder Marin was brought in on a chair carried by 2 young pack members. She was small and thin, and very old, but her eyes were clear and direct. She did not look at Darian. She looked at Kael, and something in her face shifted. Something that looked like a long-held weight being set down. Darian spoke first, as he always did. His words were careful and smooth. He called the situation a forgery. He called Kael a desperate man making desperate claims. He used words like tradition and stability and the good of the pack. He was very convincing, and several council members glanced at each other with uncertainty. Then Elder Marin asked for the lineage stone. The lineage stone was an ancient object kept in the center of the council hall. A flat piece of dark gray rock about the size of a hand, smooth and cold. A pack law, unchanged for 300 years, stated that any disputed bloodline claim must be settled by the stone. The stone did not lie. It could not be bribed or forged or persuaded. A council member placed it on the table. Elder Marin gestured to Kael. He stepped forward. He pressed his palm flat against the stone. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the stone blazed gold. It was not a subtle glow. It was bright and immediate and warm, filling that corner of the room with light the color of sunrise. Several council members stood from their chairs without deciding to. One elder covered her mouth with both hands. A younger official at the back of the room made a small, involuntary sound. And then, slowly, the wolves in the room began to respond. The same thing that had happened in the courtyard of the Voss estate happened here, in front of the entire council. Ranked wolves, proud and powerful people who had never knelt for anything in their professional lives, found their legs bending, one after another, without choosing it. Darian did not kneel. He gripped the table and stood very still. His face had gone pale beneath its careful composure. Kael removed his hand from the stone. He looked across the table at Darian. He did not raise his voice. He did not advance. He simply looked at him the way a man looks at something he once feared, and no longer does. "You sold me to save yourself," Kael said. "And every day since then, some part of you has been waiting for me to come back. You were right to wait. But what you do not understand is that I am not here because of what you did to me. I am here because of what I am. That was never yours to take. You only ever borrowed it." The council vote took 12 minutes. It was unanimous. Darian was stripped of all rank. He was not harmed. When a council member asked Kael if he wished for a harsher sentence, Kael shook his head once. "Let him go," he said. "Let him spend the rest of his life knowing exactly what he threw away." In the days that followed, the Drayson seat changed. Quietly, systematically, the way a house changes when the right person finally returns to it. Things that had been slightly wrong for a long time began to settle back into place. On the fourth day, Seraph packed her bag. She told herself it was the sensible thing to do. She was a merchant's daughter. She had no rank, no bloodline, no place in this world at its highest level. Kael was the Alpha King now. He had a throne, a council, a pack, a future that was wide and serious, and nothing like a stable room and shared evenings in a library. She was glad she had helped him. That was enough. It had to be enough. She was in the courtyard with her bag over her shoulder when she heard his footsteps on the stone. She turned. He was walking toward her with no urgency, the way he walked everywhere. Steady, unhurried, like someone who had decided where he was going a long time ago and saw no reason to rush. He stopped in front of her. "You stood between me and what was coming," he said, "before you knew who I was. Do you think a title changes what that means to me?" "I do not want to be something you owe," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. "Then be something I choose," he said simply. She had no answer for that, not a spoken one. But she put her bag down. When his hand found hers, something shifted, not in the world around them, but inside them. Deep and certain, like a door that had always existed being opened for the first time. Sarah felt it move through her from her hand upward, warm and settling, and completely unlike anything she had felt before. Her wolf, which had always been quiet and unremarkable, stood up inside her and was still. Not sleeping, but attending. Recognizing. The wolves nearby lowered their heads. Not just for the Alpha King, for the Alpha Queen beside him. The coronation happened at dawn, in the ancient stone courtyard of the Drayson seat, under a sky that was going from gray to gold. Kael stood straight and calm while the ceremonial words were spoken. He wore nothing borrowed, nothing staged. When the elder placed the mark of the Alpha King on his hand, the stone beneath it flared gold again, briefly, warmly, and the crowd of wolves gathered in the courtyard made a sound that was not cheering exactly. It was deeper than cheering. It was the sound of people who have been waiting for something right to happen and have finally seen it. At his side, Seraph stood still and steady in the growing morning light. Elder Marin, seated at the edge of the courtyard in her chair, watched all of it with clear, tired eyes. She passed away peacefully 3 days later. The last thing she was recorded to have said, to the young pack member who sat with her, was quiet and simple. "The stone always knows." They had sold him like he was nothing, like he was unclaimed and unimportant and easy to discard. They had put a collar on him and told the world he had no wolf, no rank, no future worth protecting. They were wrong about all of it. Kael Drayson did not rise because the world finally looked at him and saw clearly. He rose because he never, not once, not even in the longest and darkest stretch of those years, forgot what he was. He carried it quietly, He carried it through the auction block, and the stable room, and the iron collar. And every morning, he woke up in a life that did not belong to him yet. He carried it until the day it was ready to be seen. And on that day, the storm that had been waiting inside him for years opened its eyes, stood to its full height, and the world had no choice but to understand.